Session 6 starts with a bottle drop, which is fantastic omen. It's titled The Haji Rumal, Bengal Trade Textiles for Asian Markets, and will be presented by Mr. John Gillow, scholar and author. Mr. Gillow, all yours.
Thank you very much. Let me start off by offering my thanks to Darshan for luring me back to Calcutta, which is not difficult because it's not only my favorite city in India, but it's one of my favorite cities in the whole damn world. I love it because of its vigor, its creativity, and the hospitality of its people. Let me thank Shubham and all Darshan's team, Mayank, for putting on such a wonderful exhibition. And the catalogue is wonderful, and it would take me a while to read it all. Anyway, some of you have been familiar with me. I wander the world buying rags, taking them to customers whom I think might pay a bit more than I paid for them. And that's how I make my living. And in the process, I've been doing this for 50 years. In the process, I've learned a little. So my present obsession is for textiles, not for the hatch, from the hatch. The textiles that people bring back, particularly to Southeast Asia, to say that they show that they've been on the Hajj. This is a textile that was briefly in my collection. 20 years ago, I was in the city of Palembang in Sumatra in Indonesia. Palembang is a wonderful sounding city. You think it's beautiful and there are beautiful buildings. In fact, it's a smelly old Indonesian city. But if you look around, or you did 20 years ago, if you looked around the back streets, you could find all kinds of wonderful things. So 20 years ago, I was in a bachak, in a cycle rickshaw, scooting down this alleyway with the chap saying to me, "Oh, there are wonderful textiles here." So I went in and I looked through. The trouble with buying textiles in Sumatra is that the climate is so awful. Half the things that you look at, or well over half the things you look at, are starting to fall to pieces in your hands through insect damage and damage from the climate. So anyway, amidst all these textiles, I found two of these, I would later know as Haji Rumals. So these were brought back from the Hajj market, probably in Jeddah, and worn by the Haji when he gets back to Sumatra to show that he's been through that religious process of the pilgrimage. It's the religious duty of all Muslims to make the Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina if they can. So it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. In the 19th century, initially pilgrims gathered in two places, in Damascus and in Cairo, and they joined camel caravans which wended their way down to Mecca and Medina. It was a dangerous business. There were Bedouin bandits that you had to brave, even though they were in organized caravans which could defend themselves. Later in the 19th century, the world got richer. The British Royal Navy had sort of imposed peace on the seas. Southeast Asia, particularly what's now Indonesia, was incredibly rich, and those riches had sort of devolved down the society. So many more people could make the Hajj. They took ship, is what they did. They took ship from places like Palembang, in India, all through Indonesia and what's now Malaysia. They took ship for Mecca and Medina. Now, I didn't know when I first bought these textiles, I didn't know where they were from. I exhibited them at the tribal fair at Fort Mason in San Francisco. People came up, they were very excited by them, and some people would say they were Indian. I would say, look, I'm not sure. I've seen them in the museums in Damascus, and they might well have been made in Syria for whatever purpose. But looking at them more closely, they appear to be Bengali, and this is the consensus that these particular ones were embroidered in Dhaka and then exported to Jeddah primarily. The embroidered textiles for the Hajj from Dhaka were exported to Jeddah, to Basra, to Aden, and to Istanbul. And in all those places, you can still find these Haji Rumals. This is one I bought recently, which some members of the audience will recognize. So these, as far as I know, were worn like an Arab headdress with a head rope. I'll show you pictures, historic pictures of them being worn. There you are, you can see the distinctive Bengali embroidery. This particular one, like the previous one, is backed with this Ottoman block print. So it's a block print out of Istanbul. Late 19th century, I think the block print is, but the Haji Rumal, I should think, is the first half of the 19th century. Now this one presents a puzzle. I should think this is late 19th century or early 20th century. To me, it doesn't seem like a classic Bengali piece of embroidery from Dhaka. It's possible it's actually from Kutch. I've had Haji Rumals that were obviously embroidered in Kutch. Quite stunning visually. And this is another one of the same ilk. They usually conform to having a central square and then these oblong sections, top, bottom, and to the sides, and decorative panels in the corner. Now, these were how they were worn, and they were matters of prestige. And there's Lawrence of Arabia, all 5 foot nothing of him, in about between 1918 to 1922. And there he is wearing a Haji Rumal. So there are obviously matters of prestige. And he was a great one for sartorial splendor of an Oriental nature. And there he is. And there's King Faisal of Iraq, again wearing a Haji Rumal. Those of you who remember the film Lawrence of Arabia will recognize these characters. And this is a still from the film of Joseph Conrad's novel, Lord Jim, which I've just reread after 30, 40 years. It was a hazardous journey to make. From Southeast Asia and from India, they were mainly transported in British ships. The British then had an enormous merchant marine, and the oldest wrecks, riddled with rust, were bought by Arabs, Chinese, whatever, all the entrepreneurial classes of Southeast Asia. And they packed the pilgrims in, as many as they possibly could, and shipped them off to Jeddah on the pilgrimage, charging a fair whack in the process. This Conrad's novel was based on a notorious case where a ship in the Gulf of Aden was abandoned by its European officers who thought it was sinking, and they buggered off on the lifeboats, leaving the pilgrims to drown. The only trouble was the ship didn't sink, which was rather embarrassing. And there was a French naval vessel, found them and towed them into Aden, where they were rescued. So this is just to illustrate just how dangerous the Hajj was. So not only was it a gesture of religious significance to make the Hajj, it was damn risky. It was expensive, so you had to be usually a man, somebody of some substance with the financial wherewithal to make the pilgrimage. But you also had to have courage to do it. The ones who had come by land were mainly from the Muslim heartlands of Anatolia, basically modern Turkey, Central Asia, and North Africa. And they were the ones who congregated at the pilgrimage pickup centers in Cairo and Damascus. There were even some brave pilgrims who came all the way from West Africa, across the Sahara, and ended up in Cairo. These are also rumals made in Dhaka, embroidered in Muga silk, which is largely produced in Assam, is lustrous, golden in color, and doesn't really fade. So it was the preferred medium for embroidering these prestigious scarves. So not all the scarves that were embroidered in Dhaka were colorful. Some of them were monochrome like this. I'm indebted to Jaina Mishra from Woven Dreams in Singapore for these images. Again, from Jaina Mishra, another Haji Rumal. These were collected in Aceh. So, you know, Sumatra is a very important place for the collection of these textiles. Again, with the paisley cones, this type of embroidery was very much influenced by Kashmiri embroidery, which I think the story was the Kashmiris came down to Calcutta in the 1700s and spread their designs through the whole Bengali lexicon. This one is courtesy of Mrs. Amrita Mukherjee, again embroidered in Muga silk, and this is a shawl rather than a rumal. This is one in my collection, relatively common or garden, but interesting, and there were a lot of these embroidered in Dhaka. Mukherjee in the 1880s writes about the embroiderers. He said they were mainly women and mainly Muslim. I take the mainly Muslim, but I suspect the men were also involved in the production. Whenever there's money, men get involved in the production. This is a detail of a piece from the first half of the 20th century. There was a lot of stuff produced for the Hajj, sold in the Hajj markets of Dhaka and Surat. And through this, they were spread all over the place. I've collected bits of this style of embroidery with its floral and Kashmiri-inspired motifs all over the Muslim world. That's the whole piece. So you get turban lengths, you get shawls, and you get squares and panels like this. Now, these are interesting because these are market specific. All the other ones could have been used by a Haji from practically anywhere in the Muslim world. These ones were made for the Yemeni market, so these would have been exported primarily to Aden, which in historic times before the present chaos and the British withdrawal from Aden in 1967 was one of the great ports of the world and a focus for the trade of that area. You can distinguish the ones for the Yemeni market because they're almost always, the embroidery is red in color. Yeah, there are details. And this is hook work. There's another one. These are done largely on, almost exclusively on cotton. Where they were embroidered is a moot point. I don't think they were embroidered in Bengal. Somebody once told me they were embroidered in Hyderabad, Deccan, but I've got no evidence either way. Now, there's a whole genre of Syrian textiles that were made in imitation of the textiles from Bengal made for the Hajj. So this is hook work in a brown colored silk, And these were embroidered in Syria, either in Damascus or Aleppo, again with sort of Kashmiri designs. There is also the phenomena of Indian embroiderers being exported to places like Syria, where they would embroider in the Indian manner with Indian patterns. India not only exported its wonderful textiles, it exported its wonderful textile workers. I've seen kalamkars, the sort of basic batik, block printed cloths from Isfahan. The very best of those were exported from the East Indian coast. The second quality were made by Indian workers in Iran, and the third quality were Iranian workers. And they're still producing those cloths to this day, but not of the quality, of course, of the old ones. Now, this modest piece is a turban length, and this is from Syria, done in imitation of cloths from Bengal, from Dhaka. And now we come to some wonderful photos of chaps with large moustaches and swords and pistols. And these are from Aceh. Aceh is now supposedly languishing under Sharia law and an Islamic regime. You get in a little bus there and the girls will show you the latest dance steps. It's that kind of regime, so you can always get round the letter of the law. And these old chaps, this photo must be from around 1900. And he's armed to the tooth, wonderful moustaches and beards. But you see on their heads, they're wearing wonderful hats. And these are the kind of hats that they are wearing. I've collected these all over Indonesia and Borneo. I've seen them in Ethiopia. I've collected them in Sri Lanka. They're to be found in India. Sonia's photo of the Haji turban from Western India, I think, is wrapped around one of these. The technique that these hats are made with is a kind of patchwork in strips. It's quite complex and produces a very tough freestanding hat. They're often in this color scheme of yellow, black, red, and green with some kind of lettering, which if my Arabic was more proficient, I might be able to tell you what it is. But it's quite probably something like numbers which have a special significance. That's the side of that. And this one is the contribution of my eldest son to this lecture. He was in Aceh surfing, and I sent him an image of one of these hats, and I said, "You see anything like that? Buy it." So he went down to the Topi Bazaar, the hat bazaar in Aceh, and he bought 3 of them. So they're still being made. They're very much a symbol of Aceh. And these were exported again, I think, to Jeddah and to the other pilgrimage centers and brought back from the Hajj as a symbol that they'd been on the Hajj. It's such symbolic of Aceh that all over Aceh there are monuments, gateposts, whatever, in the shape of these hats. This is obviously tile work, not textile. And the hats are called Topi Umar, as in the first or second caliph. Now, I find all kinds of oddities in Sumatra. These two textiles, this one and the following one, I bought in Bukittinggi in West Sumatra. And they're the most beautiful wool done in twill. Now, where they're from, I don't know. Could be they're from Iran. I don't know from the pattern, I don't know from the texture, but I do know that they are totally useless for the Sumatran climate, which is incredibly hot. So these must have been brought back just as oddities. You know, they were available. I should guess these are from the early years of the 20th century. And so they brought them back just to show how different and how rich they were, as well as how devout they were. And that's the other one that I bought at the same time. And there, this is the last slide. This is a very short talk with lots of questions to be asked. What I'm hoping is that it will stimulate some research on textiles from the Hajj. So these are Achenese nobles at the turn of the 19th, 20th century. The photo was taken in Singapore. They were on a mission to go and negotiate with the British governor. The British had lately abandoned them. First of all, they'd backed them against the Dutch. But then they pirated the British ships so much, the British got exasperated and let the Dutch have their way with them. What you can see is that, as well as wonderful examples of Achenese ikat, which I'm very fond of, but I never find in any kind of saleable condition. But they're wearing Arab waistcoats, which presumably they got in Jeddah. So they're probably of Syrian manufacture. The wearing, as you know, the wearing of Arab clothes by non-Arabs is very much a symbol of how Muslim they are. Anyway, that is the end of my talk. I'm off to Malaysia and Indonesia tonight, and I will start looking for textiles. I should mention that we are privileged to have Michael Abbott, the famous collector of Indonesian textiles, in the audience. And he has just produced a book, which in his words was all the wonderful Indonesian textiles that I've given away, not the wonderful Indonesian textiles that I've kept. So do look out for that. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gillow, for a wonderful presentation. We